It's a high-stakes meeting in South Korea between President Trump and President Xi, resulting in deals, we think, on rare earths, fentanyl, and tariffs. Joining us right now is Nicholas Burns. He's a former U.S. ambassador to China, a professor at Harvard University. I said we think because we've heard from President Trump. We haven't fully heard from the Chinese on all of these issues just yet. And so I'm curious, just read the tea leaves for us.
Not a lot of detail, but I think where we are is an uneasy truce in a long, still-simmering trade war.
Okay.
I mean, on the positive side, they met, and that's actually very important. They hadn't met since 2019. If you want to get any decisions out of the government of China, you have to meet with Xi Jinping. So I actually thought that was positive. President Trump's going to be going to China in April. Xi Jinping will come to the U.S. in the autumn. In diplomacy, this is structural. It's foundational. Positives, fentanyl, leading cause of death in our society, Americans 18 to 49. The majority of the precursor chemicals come from China. So Xi Jinping said, we'll help you on fentanyl. He made the same commitment to President Biden when we met with him just last year. I hope the Chinese are going to meet this commitment.
Did they do it after they made the commitment to Biden?
There was progress on shutting down online selling platforms of these precursor chemicals, and they're exported by the Chinese black market into the drug cartels. And they make the synthetic opioid. They arrested some people, but not enough progress. So both Presidents Biden and Trump have been trying to push them on fentanyl. And let's see if the Chinese will come forward with better action. Progress on agricultural sales. This is important. 1/5 of all U.S. ag exports go to China. 2 years ago, $41 billion in sales, $14 billion of which was soybeans. So obviously the American farmer has been hurting. The Chinese have played hardball. There's been no purchases. So I think this is probably the most substantial achievement of the meeting they just had. And then, of course, the Chinese agreed they'll suspend the export controls that they put on their rare earth metals. That would have roiled global supply chains. So I think there's some real positives here. The negatives are this is not a trade deal. And if there was a trade deal, a comprehensive trade deal, they would have announced it. So I would expect further, almost like two boxers in the ring, sparring.
Give me the split screen of this. So we, at the very top of this hour, 6 o'clock, we talk about this potential tariff framework, followed by news that President Trump is announcing that we're going to begin testing nuclear weapons again live for the first time in decades.
In 3 decades.
What does that mean in this context? The fact that announcement came within hours of this trade framework?
That we're still sparring? That we're still trying to gain leverage over each other? I mean, the timing of that, a couple of hours before the two leaders sat down, had to be related to the leverage the U.S. wants to bring to the table. President Trump did say later it's about another country, Russia. And what it means is, and we've been at this since 1963 in prohibiting nuclear testing, that whole regime is breaking down. Between the United States and Russia, China comes into it because China is engaged in the largest buildup of its nuclear weapons force of any country in nuclear weapons history. They're trying to reach parity with the U.S. by the 2030s. So the fortunes and the balance of power among these 3 countries, the United States, Russia, and China, is very carefully calibrated.
But so the timing of this, you think, speaks to does it speak to the tariff issue and whatever the relationship is with China, or it doesn't? I mean, I think to the extent that he's suggesting it's related to Russia, I understand that, but the timing is so close.
I do not believe it was coincidental. I think the timing had to be. You're about to sit down with Xi Jinping. You haven't seen him in 6 years. You announce this major development that changes potentially American policy. I think it was intentional because there are a lot of unresolved issues in this relationship. The Trump administration rightly opposes what the Chinese are doing to help the Russians in the Ukraine war. There are problems on Taiwan. The president said that actually didn't come up.
You think that this was a message that was sent to say back off from helping the Russians when it comes to Ukraine?
Well, also that the United States is concerned about China's buildup of nuclear weapons. They're completely opaque. They refuse to talk to us at any meaningful level.
Did they do nuclear testing?
Pardon?
Did they do nuclear testing?
They have in the past.
Yeah.
They haven't done it recently, but they have in the past. So I think you're looking at a relationship that's forming. There's some good news in the announcements on fentanyl and ag sales and the others, but there are a lot of differences here that have prevented them from getting to a trade deal.
President Trump said yesterday that they discussed high-end chips, not Blackwell.
Right.
which is the best that NVIDIA currently has to offer. What are your concerns about what we should be giving them, what we should not be giving them?
The Chinese are trying desperately to convince the Trump administration to allow the export of advanced American semiconductors for AI purposes into the Chinese market.
So not the H-20, but the...
Not the H-20.
Yeah.
In fact, the Chinese didn't even buy the H-20.
Right.
And that was another drama. But this is very important for American national security. President Biden prohibited 3 years ago this month the sale of these chips. And why did he do that? Because the Chinese companies would then give those chips to the People's Liberation Army to basically try to have a technological leap over the U.S. military in our long-running competition for who's the biggest and most important tech power. And so this is extremely important.
Jensen Huang and others in the industry have argued that if you are not giving them, not necessarily the latest and greatest, but if you're not giving them any access to chips, that it will short-circuit American dominance in this field over the long term.
The Chinese do have access to memory chips, but not to the most advanced logic chips. Why? Because under the civil military fusion, any Chinese company has to transfer its technology to the PLA. And the PLA is trying to outpace the United States technologically in this big AI race, and we don't want to be the #2 military power in the future. What I find unconvincing about the argument from NVIDIA is the entire Chinese strategy is to make the world more dependent on China and China less dependent on the United States. You might get a year of sales, 6 months of sales, but the Chinese will innovate and they'll kick NVIDIA and Intel, other companies out. So short-lived commercial progress, but what's at stake is the national security of the United States and preventing the PLA from competing with our military.